Grace from NFP Connect, and I am connecting communities with Rob Sams from Lifeline. How are you, Rob?
I'm doing okay, thank you. In these sort of testing, ever-changing times, but times where many people are coming together. So at the moment, doing okay, thanks.
So tell us a little bit about how has your organisation been impacted by COVID?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of layers to that. So, first of all, I guess our 13, 11, 14 service is continuing. It's had an increase in the number of calls, and that's been steady since the bushfires over the summer period. But nationally, about 3,000, 3,200 calls a day now, and that changes. So that's as of today. But so an increase in the number of calls, and at last count, nearly half of those over the last week have been around COVID. So people have mentioned that, and certainly talking about greater levels of anxiety and concern. So that's, I guess, in terms of the service most people know. Our face-to-face services in the Newcastle area have had to move to telehealth or over the phone or video, and that's been an interesting change because those people are not, most of them are not telephone crisis supporters, so that's a new world or a new way of doing things for them. Been learning a lot from those guys. And then, of course, looking after our admin team, pretty much everyone is now working remotely. So like every other organisation, we've had to adapt to what that means, and lots of video conferences and catching up in that way.
So like the other organisations, you've also had to shut down all your stores.
Yeah, we have. Look, that's, in terms of our people, that's been the cause of the 3 o'clock wake-ups and the worries. So we've shut the area of the Lifeline that I look after. We have 30 shops across various different regions. So that's been around 60-odd people, 60-plus people. We have many volunteers as well, but 60-plus paid people who we've kept employed for the minute, which we're really proud of. We're redeploying people with skills. So some people, for example, might have finance skills and be able to help out, or admin skills. And that's really good that we're in a position to do that. We've been saving for the rainy day. We've been responsible financially. But that, what's the end to that? I don't know. And I suppose that's the challenge we're all faced with, is when is the end of this? And no one really knows the answer to that.
And that really is one of those things that we just got to get through each day, week, month. Yeah.
And I guess that's the way we've been talking with our team. I mean, particularly our guys in the retail team. There's lots of things they can be doing now. It's almost like when you said, "Gee, I wish I had the time to do that." I'm saying to the team, "Well, now you have." In fact, I don't say that to the team; they're saying that to me. People are getting in and getting things done. So it's been really cool. But there are a lot of people that are worried about their jobs as well, and some people are working less days and taking leave, those kind of things. But understandably, that's the greatest worry I have from our people's perspective, our own internal people.
So, what have you learned or are learning through this process?
Yeah, I definitely take the latter. I think it's the learning, isn't it? For me, learning's ongoing. It's that continual reflection. What happened today? What's planned for tomorrow? One of the things, I guess, that I've been talking to our team about, I'll show you a book. I'm not sure if that's coming up on the screen, but it's a book I read a while ago called Crisis Intervention, and you would have seen there's 2 symbols. It's the Chinese way that they describe crisis, and those 2 ideographs, one stands for danger and the other stands for opportunity. And I think that's where we're really at with this, is the danger's real. Our team are taking it seriously, the well-being of our staff. Just look at Italy, and if you can't see that the danger's real. But the opportunities, and you talk about learning, we're learning new and different ways to connect, to support others. Our face-to-face counsellors are learning to connect with people on the telephone or via video, and that's new for them. We're normally doing it face-to-face in this nice or more intimate, personal setting. And I was talking with one of our face-to-face counsellors yesterday who said there was some real silence on the telephone. Now, when our face-to-face counsellors do that in a room, that's not a bad thing, because it is good to sit. But when you can't see that on the telephone, that's a real challenge. So actually, one of the interesting things is our telephone crisis supporters are teaching our face-to-face team some skills and tips there, because there are some good things that you can do. So I think I had to summarise the learning. It's both danger and opportunity through crisis.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. And I love what comes up. I think I've had different conversations with people over the last few days and doing videos like this. And, you know, like the fires kind of taught us, like, sort of semi-prepped us for this in a way of, you know, where does, like, especially with the donations and the reactiveness and all that sort of stuff of the craziness that happens and that, you know, the human nature that occurs through something like this.
Yeah.
And then we're kind of now ready. And I feel like charities are actually so prepared in some ways, because we're naturally reactive, we're naturally nimble, you know, we've had to be. And so there's this sort of, we're kind of already, we're on the front foot a little bit, but we're also got to be open-minded about how we move forward, you know, because I think we kind of got stuck in a way, which you and I talked about before, but we got stuck in a way that wasn't necessarily as healthy as it could be in our space. And so this is kind of that reinvigoration of, this is where we shine, this is where we step up, and how do we move into that? So what you, Roz?
Hello there. Yeah, I think it's you just made me think. I spent lots of years working in corporates, and you can still work for good things when you work for corporations, absolutely. But I think one of the things that strikes me in the last few years working with Lifeline is our job is to be in community. And so at the moment, what does the community need? And so in some ways, it's easy for us to know what we should be doing, because we are listening to the community. We're not thinking about how many widgets we're making or can't make. And so I think our job is to listen to what the community is saying, hear that and feel it. And of course, that's challenging when we're not out and amongst it like we normally are. But I think if we are, I often say at Lifeline, in community, for community, and with community. And I think it's all three of those. In community, so we learn in that community, for community, because that's what we're about, and with them. We do it together. And certainly, I guess that's one thing at Lifeline is that we are not all answers to all questions, and we don't pretend to be. And we can only be successful if we're with others.
Absolutely. So some people have children. I have Rosellas.
Yes. Very good.
I'm like, should I feed them? So what have you found any good programs or support or resources throughout this?
Look, I don't know that we've got anything new that's that others haven't. We're certainly using Skype, Zoom, and Microsoft Teams to connect digitally, and all of those things are working well. We're talking on Zoom now. How cool is that? The telephone's fine, but to talk like this and to see each other's a step above that. So I don't think we've got anything. I mean, we've got great resources being part of Lifeline Australia, so we've got access to those tools, which we're grateful for here locally. But I think it's actually how we're using those tools, which is what I've learned. Our team are, I can't tell you from our few hundred admin staff across the country that are part of our team, admin and retail and others, how many personal messages I've got just to say, hey, how are you doing? That feels incredibly caring. And it's the thing is, people are able to do it. They don't feel a bother. They just drop a short line. I appreciate every single one of them. So I think it's the tools that are there is making us all accessible. And we are, for the minute at least, and I'm not sure this continues for 6+ months. I mean, I'm finding it really tiring on video conferences all day, more so than in person. But I think it's how we're using those tools and just the fact that we are connecting so often.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next question is, what have you found is the hardest thing from working from home?
Yeah, we were just talking before, Grace. I mean, personally, I've worked from home for years. Before my role with Lifeline, I was consulting and worked out of this home office, actually. So it's well kitted out and it's fine and comfortable. And I don't have children at home during the day. So I feel like I've got it okay. But, the thing that struck me, I think there's a few things. I have a newfound increase, because it was already there, increased respect for working parents. And I think particularly parents who've got, school-age kids who The other day I called them a distraction. I thought, no, that's not right. They're not a distraction. They're kids needing the parents, and that's tough. So I think that's probably one of the hardest things is you are working in a completely different environment to what we're used to. And I think one of the things I've asked our team to be, and I'm trying to be really conscious of this, is one, be more flexible. So if you've got the kids there and it's 10 o'clock and it's normal morning tea time and you've got a meeting, then you either don't have the meeting or you accept that the kids are going to come and need some attention. That of course they should, and of course they do. And two, maybe there needs to be some flexibility. So I've encouraged our team to think about what that means and when we have meetings, and it might be early in the morning, whilst maybe there's one parent at home, one going off to work, or one's doing something at home, the others. I just think we need to be flexible. We need to be tolerant, and that sounds really easy. And with that, we can adapt and we can do better work. But it's not always easy.
So, given you're one of the larger organisations, do you have any advice for charities that might be trying to get through this?
Yeah, my advice, or I think a partnership. I mentioned before, in community, for community, with community, is how do we work together? And the reason I'm probably hesitating with that, because I know many of us do already. But I think, and I've been talking with a couple of smaller charities and organisations, and encouraging how can we support and work with each other. Where are we complementary and where are we not? What do you need and how can we help? And I think there's many. I mean, it's going to be tough because lots of small organisations don't have the IT access, for example. I know a person who's a counsellor, working particularly with people with domestic violence. That's to try and, I mean, we've moved our service to telehealth and talking on the telephone or digital. Now that's a whole new world, we know, with domestic violence, and that's really challenging. The first thing you want to be doing if you're talking to someone, in that case on the telephone, will be checking for safety, which is completely different to the safety of an environment they might normally be in. So, I think I'm keen to partner with other organisations. I'm keen to hear other organisations in the Newcastle and Hunter region, particularly, who might need some help. To sing out a shout out, let us know what we can do to support each other. We know it's harder on our own, and not that we have all the resources or all the answers, but even if it's just saying g'day and checking in, because that's nice to do as a peer. So that's probably the key message, is how do we partner and work together.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I think we're doing, so it's definitely needed, and I think the conversation's being had, which is, because I think when we get thrown down to this simplistic level of, what can we provide and what do we support, like everyone's then got their own criteria. They're not trying to survive the organisation or do all that sort of stuff. It's like, this is what we do, let's focus on that. Then we will then, that new kind of birthing of referral system comes into play. We are in it together. That's the biggest thing.
Absolutely.
So the big question is, what has been a blessing that you found through this?
I think there's probably two blessings that come to mind. The first is that we're through the environment, through the working conditions we're at now, we've been more innovative than we probably ever have been. It's probably the first thing. So those things that we'd had on the radar for 12 to 18 months, maybe a bit longer, going, let's work towards that. Some of those things have happened in a week. Now, they're not been perfect solutions and perfectly worked through scenarios, but we've been able to put some things in place we've been talking about for so long. So I think that's a huge blessing. You've got to be balanced out with making sure that appropriate governance processes are in place, because we can't just go off and do everything we wanted to do. But I found that it's maybe if I summarise it, that's an attitude. We can do this now, or we should, or we must. So I think that's a real blessing. But to me, there is no greater blessing in the role that I'm in, is then just seeing our team come together and stay together, support each other. I talked about flexibility and patience before, and I've seen that, not only just talking it from the figurehead, we should be more flexible. I've actually seen people demonstrate that, and it's heartening. And and I think, what I'm really hoping we do is we can build on that. It's almost like we've done team building in 3 weeks in this unplanned way, but you could never plan to do it as well. It's been kind of cool.
That made me think about when I used to work at Canteen. I remember part of our monthly reporting, we would have to write where we had our values. So there might have been compassion, kindness, whatever the values were.
Yeah.
For that, and at the end, every end of month, we would have to write how do we feel that we had displayed those values,
yep.
And then how had we shown others, like how had we seen others showing those values to us or in the work environment.
Yep.
And I think that's actually a real, what you're saying is like, sure, we see it and we notice it, but do we actually say it to the other person? Hey, just wanted to let you know, I really noticed, and especially when we're so we're not face to face, or it's kind of a bit more confronting. You could say, "Hey, I really noticed this," and then press end meeting. Like,
yes.
Like it's really saying, you know what? Like, hey, I noticed that you did this, and I just want to let you know that I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And stuff like that then formulates, because I remember it was such an important thing. We would have to search each month for how did I do it, and then okay, if I didn't do it, then because you had to fulfill, there were 8 of them or 9 of them, and there had to be at least 3 or 4 of them that you had to kind of report on. So if you hadn't reported on it, you were like, oh my God, I've got to sort myself out next month. And so it just then becomes this conscious thing.
Yeah.
As you and I were saying before, previously, is like, how do we then create these new ways of connecting that we sort of took for granted before? We were kind of like, because we're there with, and now that we're like, oh, well, how do we do that? Like, how does that birth out of this?
Yeah.
So lastly, tell us about the services. I know, like, just really to give people an understanding, your service is one of the most important, if not the most important service throughout this time. What's available to the community from Lifeline?
Yeah. So most people will know 13, 11, 14, and I encourage people to put that number in their phone. What some people don't know is what that service is. It's not manned by psychologists who can fix lots of problems in a 20-minute phone call or a 30-minute phone call, but we're there to connect with people. And I say that so people, we don't judge, we welcome everybody, and you can talk about whatever you like. So that's 13, 11, 14. We also have a text service, which is a similar service to that, obviously delivered via text between 6 p.m. and midnight, and that's 0477 13 11 14. And we know, we were talking before, the younger generation, it can be easier to just text something through. The other thing I like about text is you could be in the middle of a challenging situation, whatever that might be, or you'd be feeling pretty down in the middle of, just with the family watching the telly, and you can be texting and no one knows it's to Lifeline. So in our trials of that service, we found males 15 to 44 particularly said to us they wouldn't have contacted Lifeline if not for that method. So I think that's particularly good. We have a crisis chat service which is available on lifeline.org.au/crisis chat. So and that's between 7 p.m. and midnight. And all of those things are available nationally, and we support them here in the local area. We have people answering the phones. We also have a face-to-face service, which I mentioned before, is now being done over the telephone and digitally via video. And it's important we keep that service going because it's not dissimilar to the telephone, but we don't discriminate. You don't need a mental health referral, and it costs nothing. So those services, we aim to be available and try to remove any barriers to that. Interestingly, and I know you've talked recently with Shane from LivingWorks, and we run a number of those programs. Start is a great one. I'm sure he mentioned that, which is an online 1 hour, typically interactive session where you can learn how to pick up the cues or the symbols or invitations that people might be having around suicide and how to respond. So talk to LivingWorks about that. You can talk to us about that. We roll it out with them. And we're also looking at a range of other online options for our training, which build capacity in the community, because we know, this has been recorded early April, that we've got an indication in New South Wales this morning, these restrictions are here for at least the next 3 months. So we're not going to sit back and just say our training's not being done for the next 3 months. We'll listen to the community and we'll develop ways to do that. And likewise, we want to connect with others. As I mentioned before, I think partnering is key. So they're probably the key services that we have available, and they're available for everybody in our community. That's the most important thing to remember.
That's so awesome. Thanks so much, Shane. I really appreciate it. And I know with that, and I've mentioned this before in a previous interview that we did, when my sister lost her husband to suicide, I called Lifeline to ask how I could support her.
Yeah.
Peak hour traffic in Morrisdale. It was a really helpful thing for how do I deal with this. And I had subsequently done another course, which was the accidental counsellor.
Yeah.
And so that was really helpful to sort of help me understand how I could support her best, because that was kind of one of the hardest things is, so it's not just about the person that's going through crisis. It can be anyone that's supporting someone that feels overwhelmed in any circumstance. I'm now here with my parents, and I was like, oh, that text message, like, I'm here with my parents. They're both elderly. They've both got respiratory issues. So, we're in lockdown. And so making sure that, like, I look after myself in supporting them. And so this is perfect, the perfect kind of support. And I would absolutely use it if I needed to. Yeah. And I have used it in the past. So I just anyone that's kind of wants to have more of an idea, it's for everyone.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, that's the point I try to make. We are often quoted at the end of news stories. Certainly our work has a role to play in suicide prevention. We know that. But we are there for people in crisis, in distress, who are lonely, who are feeling concerned and anxious, and feel like a conversation with somebody. Absolutely the key thing, we're not perfect human beings, but a key part of our service is we don't judge.
Yep.
It is not our place to judge you or tell you what you're doing or what you're feeling is right or wrong. We're there to meet you at a time when you feel like you need to be met.
Yep, and that's awesome. It's such a great, amazing service. So thank you so much, Rob CMs, for being here today, for having a chat with me. I will put all the details of all the links that Rob he talked about at the end of this presentation, but also underneath with his website. So if you've got any questions, you can either contact them or send us an email. So thanks so much, Rob.
It's been a pleasure, Grace. Thanks for chatting. Cheers. Bye.